Hey, step away from the vehicle. Let me see your ID.
For what reason? I'm pumping gas. I haven't done anything illegal.
Don't play games. A car like this doesn't belong to you.
That assumption? That's exactly the problem.
At exactly 9:47 p.m., under the harsh white lights of a roadside petrol station, a routine fuel stop that should have taken 3 minutes turned into a full-blown public humiliation, caught on Bodycam and packaged for the internet. A black federal judge had pulled in driving a luxury car, the kind of vehicle that makes people glance over twice without even thinking. But one officer didn't just glance. He locked in, rolled up like he'd spotted a suspect, and decided, without evidence, that the man at the pump didn't look like the kind of person who should be driving something that expensive. That's the moment this stopped being about petrol and started being about power, bias, and what happens when someone with a badge meets someone who actually knows the law. The Bodycam style story that went viral wasn't famous because of a chase, a weapon, or a dramatic takedown. It spread because it was painfully familiar, a black man existing in public with something nice, and an authority figure treating that as probable cause. Viewers saw the same pattern play out in real time. Suspicion first, justification later. And what made this incident different is that the man being targeted wasn't just any citizen. He was a federal judge, someone who spends his life evaluating whether government officials followed the rules, whether stops were lawful, and whether "I had a hunch" is actually enough to detain someone. Judge Marcus Harrison, calm, composed, and clearly used to dealing with arrogant people, wasn't at the station to prove anything. He wasn't looking for a confrontation. He wasn't filming a gotcha video. He was doing what millions of people do every day, stepping out, swiping a card, and letting the pump run. The atmosphere was quiet, the forecourt was mostly empty, and the only soundtrack was the click of the nozzle and distant road noise. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't blocking anyone. He wasn't arguing with an attendant. He was simply fueling up and minding his business until the patrol car entered the lot like it was responding to a crime in progress. The officer, confident, sharp-toned, and already acting like the situation belonged to him, pulled in behind the judge's car at an angle, the classic positioning meant to control movement. Then he stepped out and approached fast, not like someone doing a friendly welfare check, but like someone who had already decided what the story was going to be. Before the judge could even finish pumping, the officer started with demands instead of questions. "Step away from the vehicle. Let me see your ID. Whose car is this?" The words weren't just requests. They were commands designed to force submission first and explanation later. The judge didn't match the officer's energy. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff his chest. He did something far more dangerous to an insecure authority figure. He stayed calm and asked a simple question. What is the reason? In other words, am I being detained? And if so, for what? That one question is where everything shifted, because it forces the officer to reveal whether this is a real investigation or just a fishing expedition. And you could practically hear the frustration in the officer's voice because he wasn't prepared to articulate a lawful reason. He was prepared to intimidate. Instead of providing clarity, the officer began circling the car, scanning it like a bargain hunter searching for a flaw, trying to manufacture suspicion out of thin air. He hinted at thefts, implied the vehicle might be stolen, and spoke in that tone that pretends to be professional while still delivering an accusation. The judge offered the obvious solution: run the plate. That's what plates are for. If you suspect the car is stolen, verify it through the system. But the officer didn't want verification, because verification ends the fantasy. What he wanted was compliance, a performance of authority where the judge would nervously over-explain himself, hand over paperwork, and accept the humiliation as normal. Then came the moment where the bias stopped being subtle. The officer didn't just ask for identification, he started questioning the judge's right to possess the car at all. Where'd you get the money for this? That question isn't about traffic safety. It isn't about a specific crime. It's a social judgment disguised as policing, built on an assumption that a black man in a luxury car must have done something wrong to get there. The Bodycam style breakdowns emphasize exactly that dynamic. Suspicion isn't triggered by behavior, it's triggered by status, and who the officer believes is allowed to have it. At this point, the judge had two options that a lot of people recognize in their bones. Option 1, comply completely, swallow the disrespect, and hope the officer gets bored and leaves. Option 2, assert rights calmly, knowing that assertion itself can provoke escalation from someone who views questions as defiance. The judge chose the only lane that protects dignity without provoking chaos. Steady voice, clear questions, and no sudden movements. He made it clear that he was not resisting, not threatening, and not doing anything illegal. He was simply asking the officer to justify the detention. And that's when the officer made the mistake that turned an ugly encounter into a catastrophic one. The judge identified himself as a federal judge, not as a threat, not as a flex, as a fact, because at some point, an officer who is operating in good faith should step back, slow down, and realize they may be crossing lines that don't just cause embarrassment, but lawsuits. But the officer didn't step back. He doubled down, dismissing it, mocking it, acting like the judge was lying, because the officer's ego had already invested too much in the original assumption. If he acknowledged the judge's identity now, he'd have to admit the stop never should have happened. AIKTPS, odjakter www.youtube.com/watch white WWVQ7PNQZ8. The oh no moment didn't arrive with a dramatic speech. It arrived the way it usually does for bad policing. Through routine verification, the officer finally ran the plate. And when the system came back clean, no stolen vehicle hit, no warrant, no probable cause, the whole narrative collapsed instantly. The body cam captured the tonal shift that always happens when reality arrives. Less barking, more hesitation, more vague explanations, more attempts to reframe the situation as if it had been reasonable all along, but it hadn't, and both of them knew it. The judge, still calm, laid out the core issue with surgical precision. The officer's only reason for contact was the belief that a black man shouldn't be driving that car. That's not policing, that's profiling. And once you name it out loud, it's hard to unring that bell, because now the encounter isn't just uncomfortable, it's documented. The body cam doesn't care about excuses. The body cam records tone, escalation, and whether the officer had any objective reason to do what he did. In a world where departments often hide behind "we investigated ourselves," video makes denial a lot harder. After the confrontation ended, most people would have left angry and shaken, telling friends about that cop who harassed me, and maybe filing a complaint that disappears into a drawer. But a judge is trained to document patterns, preserve facts, and write in a way that institutions cannot ignore. Instead of an emotional rant, the judge's response, like many viral body cam case narratives emphasize, becomes structured. Badge number, time, location, exact statements, sequence of events, and why those actions cross legal and ethical boundaries. The difference between a complaint that dies and a complaint that detonates is often detail, clarity, and evidence. And here, the evidence was already rolling. When a story like this hits the internet, the fallout isn't just bad PR. It's risk management, it's internal affairs, it's public records requests, it's civil rights lawyers and city attorneys calculating exposure. Because the question becomes painfully simple. Was there reasonable suspicion, or was there bias disguised as duty? And if the answer points toward bias, the consequences can be severe, not only for the officer's career, but for the department's credibility and the city's budget. Viral case-style videos repeatedly frame that exact lesson. The smallest, pettiest misuse of authority can become the most expensive mistake of someone's life. Here's the bigger lesson. Most people don't know the law deeply enough to challenge an unlawful detention in real time. And some officers rely on that. They rely on fear, confusion, and the social pressure to just cooperate even when cooperation means surrendering dignity. But when someone knows exactly what police can and cannot do, when someone stays calm, asks the right questions, and refuses to be bullied into admitting guilt for simply existing, the power dynamic shifts. The uniform doesn't automatically win. The assumptions don't become facts just because they're spoken with confidence. Knowledge becomes the equalizer. So here's the question for you. If you were at a petrol pump doing absolutely nothing wrong and an officer demanded your ID with no clear reason, would you comply immediately to keep things safe? Or would you ask calmly, am I being detained because your rights matter too? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, where arrogance meets consequences, make sure you subscribe.